Welcome to this Decline and Fall special, the first of a number of special reports we'll be doing on issues related to the main topics that we cover on the program, that, of course, being those related to the decline and fall of the Anglo-American Empire. This particular film is focused on repression of Palestine solidarity activism in Scotland, with a particular focus on Glasgow. Now, ever since the government led by Sir Keir Starmer and his motley crew, banned the group called Palestine Action, following their hideous crime of spray painting a RAF aircraft that, as it turns out, doesn't even belong to the British government. It belongs to a hedge fund. After that, Yvette Cooper, this wretched, foolish woman who is, of course, answers to the title of Home Secretary, decided to ban Palestine Action by prescribing them and labeling them as a terrorist organization. An act which, by the way, the Scottish National Party, who sits in government in Scotland, abstained on, using the very flimsy excuse that there was a bad Russian group on the same list as Palestine Action, and therefore they couldn't possibly vote against the prescription of Palestine Action because it was included in a list with two other groups who the SNP very much did want to ban. So they abstained. This, of course, is a typically slimy cop-out from the leadership of the SNP, and one that is fairly typical of their way of operating. But we'll begin this film with a bit of footage that we shot several weeks ago in Glasgow. This came immediately after the banning of Palestine Action and their proscription inside all of Britain under the terms of the Terrorism Act 2000, which is a massively repressive piece of legislation, which many of us at the time actually said would only lead to this act being used to suppress domestic dissent and often suppress and ban even entirely peaceful groups that are going about the business that everybody in the British government claims they're in favour of, which is to contest by peaceful protest the policies of the government, something they say they're all in favour of when it comes to, say, Iran or Russia or China. But when it's done here, of course, it must immediately be banned. And this was what was always going to be happening once a piece of legislation such as the Terrorism Act 2000 got pushed through. It enabled the government to essentially ban any organisation that they wanted to and label them as terrorists. A completely ridiculous, completely dishonest position, but one which the successive governments since the days of Tony Blair have been working towards. These are governments that, of course, are both Labour and Tory and Liberal. Let's not forget them. They are all guilty of pushing forward a repressive domestic agenda which is designed to limit what can be legally done in terms of actual protest, and to be giving the government the powers to use the police and the courts to suppress dissent. That's an agenda which is shared all the way across the political establishment, and it's an agenda which is deep-rooted within the permanent bureaucracy of the British state itself, particularly those who are, of course, close to the security services, particularly MI5, MI6, etc. Britain is becoming a more and more repressive place, or at least they are attempting to push it in that direction. But as we will see in the coming film footage, there are, of course, still ways which activists can fight back. And often, government's cases, which they try to bring against people they've arrested or they've had the police arrest, fall apart when actually challenged in court. And we'll be getting to that later on. Now, as I've already said, the first piece of footage we're going to be showing here is one I shot on the streets of Glasgow a number of weeks ago, immediately after Palestine Action were first banned, and it relates to the arrest of long-time peace activist Sean Clerkin by Police Scotland. So we'll cut to that, and this will be very much the setting of the scene for the rest of this film. Welcome back to the tab. We are live from central Glasgow today, where we are at a Palestine solidarity protest, where long-time Glasgow peace activist Sean Clerkin has been arrested for daring to hold up the sign with the words Palestine and the word action in the same rough sentence. This, of course, is in response to the banning of Palestine Action and its designation as a terrorist organization by the Westminster government. in their usual sneaky, underhanded, authoritarian fashion. You might notice behind me, over my shoulder, a certain number of representatives of Police Scotland. There's about 8 of them now. It's funny that they've turned out that many men and women. Let's not forget the lady cops now, because ladies can arrest people for spurious reasons just as sends they do. They've turned out a number of members of Police Scotland to police this entirely peaceful process. Whereas apparently you can't get a member of Police Scotland to go down to one of the major crack dealing hubs in Glasgow, which is just 2 city blocks away, where crack deals and crack smoking carries on all day, and the police are completely on it. If one asks what exactly are the priorities of Police Scotland are, is it public safety or is it following the orders of Keir Starmer and the defence of the interests of the British state? I think we all know the answer, but dear viewers, you could let us know in the comments what you think the answer is. And if you agree with the priorities of Keir Starmer and Police Scotland, and let's just throw in John Swinney there as well, he's on board with all of this, maybe make a defence of them in the comments. Thank you for watching. It's sure to share the video. As part of the conditions for his release from custody by Police Scotland, Sean Clerkin was given a ban from entering Glasgow city centre, which is an absurdly repressive measure. Now, fortunately, he was able to legally challenge this, and after his successful action against the ban on him entering the city centre, we caught up with him at a Palestine solidarity rally in Glasgow recently. Here is the interview that we shot with him on the day. Okay, so we're back here today with Sean Clerkin, who was arrested recently under the Terrorism Act and for this terrible crime of holding up a sign. So, Sean, first of all, before we get to the recent legal action you've been involved in, can you tell us what were you arrested for?
Just arrested for putting up pulling out a placard or a banner, whatever you want to call it, a piece of paper, saying the end to genocide, it is Palestine, time to take action. And the bottom line is, so people who are peaceful, people who are humanitarian, people who are for the children and the women, the men of Palestine are the criminals. And where the real criminals are like Starmer and Lamy and the rest of them, sending arms to Israel, allowing the IDF to come to this country, be trained up and how to kill children and send them back. These are the people that are in control of our country, and that cannot be allowed to continue. We have got to have a country that's based on democracy. What these arrests have showed is that we're now living in an authoritarian nation, the Britain. We're living in a police state, and the Police Scotland, who used to police by consensus, are no longer doing that. They're policing by diktat from the leaders above in London and Westminster. And to be quite frank, I have to say this, the sooner Scotland gets its independence away from authoritarian Westminster and the people of Scotland can make decisions like Ireland does and support Palestine. We as Scotland will always support Palestine.
Now, Sean, you were banned from the city centre initially as part of the action that was taken against you by Police Scotland. But I gather you've recently managed to get this overturned.
Yes, I raised a private action against the Crown. And it took a day and a half in Glasgow Sheriff Court, but the ban was lifted from midnight on Friday morning. So we won a victory there, and we want to win more victories in the courts. And I would say to people who are listening to this, please go to Glasgow Sheriff Court on Monday at 9:30 and support the gentleman who was speaking up there. His name was just
Mick Napier.
Right, support Mick Napier on Monday morning in court, because he's been charged with a hate crime, and it's not hatred, it's love. It's love of children, men and women in Palestine. And that's what it's about. It's about stopping the genocide. It's about stopping the ethnic cleansing. It's about stopping creating a concentration camp in Rafah. This is what it is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
And I took a private action against the Crown and won the rescinded that ban. So this is the start of the fight for victory. One of the most serious stories, I just want to say the following. A man called Nassim Faturi, who is one of the leaders of the Zionist entity, said the following: "Erase Gaza, nothing else will satisfy us. Do not leave a child there. Expel anyone at the end, because we want no one there." That's what he said. And that is what we are facing against. Seat in your head and
the Zionist entity. That's what we are facing, and we are here against. Hundreds of innocent people up and down the land, throughout Britain, throughout Scotland, have been arrested. And what have they been arrested for? For being against genocide, for being against ethnic cleansing in Palestine. The Zionist entity will do anything, anything. And here in Scotland, they are at it through their agencies, the British government. They're attacking freedom of speech. They're attacking freedom of expression. They're attacking freedom of assembly. And they're attacking freedom of association. Groups like Palestine Action should not be banned. They should be deproscripted as of tomorrow. The enemies of humanity now includes the complicit British government, because they continue to visit Israel, continue to take their blood money from Israeli loyalists. They continue to supply arms to Israel. They continue to trade with Israel. And all they can do is use weasel words and whinge. The time is for action for all good people in this country. So I will say this in finality. I call on John Swinney and the British government to go beyond words. There should be a state boycott, a Scottish government boycott of all things to do with Israel. And that means boycotting Israel, using the principles of divest and boycott. That's what has to happen. And let's do it now, comrade. Let's stay together.
Now, one of the leading figures in Palestine solidarity activism in Scotland is, of course, Mick Napier. He is currently facing charges related to hate crimes and charges of terrorism, which, of course, have been thrown at him by the government related to his entirely peaceful Palestine solidarity activism. In the case of the hate crime charge, which was up in court in Glasgow on August the 11th, and I attended that day in court to observe. The hate crime charge is related to an entirely peaceful counter-protest that was held last year against a pro-Israel rally organised by Glasgow Friends of Israel, as Mick will go on to describe in the interview we're about to play. But of course, he has also been charged with terrorism offences under the aforementioned and extremely repressive Terrorism Act 2000. So here's the interview with Mick Napier. It must be said that this trial that he's undergoing for hate crime charges will continue on September the 25th. So that's a date for your diaries if you want to attend the solidarity action for him outside Glasgow Sheriff's Court. That should get underway around about 9:30 on the 25th of September. So keep your eyes open for that one and be sure to attend if you can. But here is our interview with Mick Napier of the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Right, so this is a part of our Decline and Fall special on the repression-facing Palestine Solidarity activists in Scotland. We're here today with Mick Napier, Scottish Palestine Solidarity. Mick, what were you in court for today?
Two terrible crimes. One was a peaceful sit-in in Barclays Bank, which was ended up at the cops carting us out. And the other one was objecting to an Israeli embassy organised so-called vigil for Israeli hostages. But in fact, support for the genocide. Hate crime, racism really is what it's all about. And it looks very much like we'll defeat that. It's so insubstantial, although it carries the whole nonsense carries in the media and the BBC, a court is a place where they can be cross-examined and slaughtered.
Yes.
Slaughtered. And what they say shown to be Israeli embassy policy to conflate criticism of the genocide with anti-Semitism.
And what
Substantially about.
And what is your reaction to the what is a flagrant misusage of anti-racism laws to defend the actions of the State of Israel?
Come on, you have to feel sorry for them. What else are they going to do? They can't defend the genocide. They can't defend anything about what Israel is doing. So the only strategy they've got is to smear critics, whether it be, the Italian coming from their human rights group, will sanction the ICC, etc. They're doing this because they lost the debate.
Yes.
If they were winning the debate, they would continue it. But because they've been marginalised, public opinion is running massively against Israel. That's when they try and silence and intimidate. But events in London last Saturday show that it ain't working.
Yes, certainly. And this is just one of many cases that you personally are facing at the moment. So how many cases in total have been brought against you by the authorities?
Well, there's two questions there. One, there's only another couple of cases. One is hate crime again.
Yes.
Against Glasgow Friends of Israel, which will be another pleasure in court dealing with that. And terrorism were charged with the Section 12.
Yes.
So that'll be a jury, and that will hold the threat of 14 years imprisonment.
Right.
For wearing the T-shirt and is allegedly supporting Palestine action. But once again, positioned ourselves so that we'll be able to win that way. No question about it.
And do you think that the reason why there is so much repression against Palestine solidarity activists at the moment is because the government can't hold the position of actually supporting Israel any longer in the face of massive public opinion, and they're resorting to more repressive tactics to intimidate people?
In a sense, no, I'd qualify that. They've been repressing pro-Palestine voices in universities and using the criminal justice system in Scotland for the last 16 years.
Yes.
Actually, well before the current plummet in Israeli public support. So, yes, in a sense, but they've been doing it long before the present crisis. The government now finds itself in, but it just has to try and distance itself rhetorically in Israel. Well, continue to pump weapons in. So they're like a cat in a hot tin roof. They don't want to be there. This is where they've got themselves by supporting the government. I think it's a little bit like Israel's a Frankenstein monster. Britain in the West created it, gave it succor, gave it heavy water for nuclear weapons, gave it everything. And now they're a bit horrified by the fact that they want to just do a completely naked, without any veil over it, genocide. So that doesn't play well with even Tory voters in Britain.
Yeah.
It doesn't play well at all. So now they're in a quandary. Now, they're going for repression at the moment. I think the government could get a hiding on this. I think this could grow, and they might have to find some way to extricate themselves from the mass arrests. And so, who knows? I can't be sure, but I mean, that's where we are. But an unusual moment where the crimes of the government, the complicity. There's a government that supported the killing of 3 million people in Vietnam, supported the Khmer Rouge for a period of time, has supported all sorts of unsavoury regimes. But now, support to Israel is costly, politically, and very costly. And that's why the Scottish government last week capitulated and said this is genocide. And we'll see what happens, right?
A final question, Mick. If people are watching this and they want to find out more about Palestine solidarity activism in Scotland, how can they best get involved?
Easy. Go to the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign website, through our Facebook page, social media. Get in touch with me if you want. 0795 800 2591. 0795 800 2591. Use any mini channel to do that. And we've got a job for you.
All right. Excellent. Thanks, Mick. I'm recording this on the 12th of August 2025, and the previous weekend saw mass demonstrations in favour of solidarity with the Palestinian people and their struggle for nationhood across all of Britain and more widely across the world, including places like Australia, and there are, of course, ongoing demonstrations inside the United States in the teeth of mass repression led by, of course, Donald Trump himself. Now, what the Metropolitan Police demonstrated, that is, of course, if you're not familiar with the police forces of Britain, they are the London area police force. Now, they arrested over 400 people, most of whom seem to be people in their 80s and people with disabilities, and a whole variety of obviously very dangerous criminals who often need assistance to walk. But they were all, of course, people of conscience who came out against the ban on Palestine action. And for that, they were arrested. Now, as we saw from the interview we've just played with Mick Napier, it is often the case that when the government tries to bring charges against people for things like hate crimes or using the Terrorism Act 2000 to try and claim that people are dangerous criminals merely for having opinions or staging protests or attending protests, that these cases fall apart in court, which is why they are trying to restrict the right to trial by jury. It's why they are continually bringing in more and more repressive anti-protest legislation. And this brings us to the concluding point of this short film. Now, not all of you who watch the Decline and Fall show will be convinced Marxist-Leninists, that we realize that they might even be a minority of our audience. But what I hope all of us can agree on and take forward is this idea that we need a unified mass campaign in support of free speech and democratic rights inside Britain itself. This is something which has, of course, been a problem for quite a long time, and it's a problem which has hamstrung many movements which have run into the teeth of the repression of the British state. Now, the restrictions on free speech and the restrictions on the right to protest, these have been going on and have been being increased over a very long period of time. So it really is absolutely imperative now that we unify as many people as possible in a campaign to make sure that we get rid of such ridiculous and repressive pieces of legislation which were never needed in terms of actual law enforcement, such as the Terrorism Act 2000. That we actually get rid of the attempts by this government and multiple previous governments, because it's not just Keir Starmer, this is a shared agenda of the entire political elite in Britain to restrict free speech, both online and in the real world. And this has been done over numerous years. It has been coming to the point where we are now seeing, of course, people being charged with hate crimes for holding an entirely peaceful demonstration, and the manipulation of terrorism laws, the manipulation of anti-racism laws to serve the agenda of the government in London and, of course, more widely, the State of Israel and its defenders. Now must be the time that we unify in defense of our democratic right to protest and that we unify in defense of free speech. Because if we don't do that, then we are going to be only facing more and more of this type of repressive legislation and repressive acts by the police and the government. So now is the time to come together, not only in solidarity with the Palestinian people and their struggle for nationhood, but also in defense of our own rights to freedom of assembly and freedom of speech. Many people in British history have suffered and they have been imprisoned and even killed to secure greater free speech and democratic rights. We must defend these. We must turn back the government's attempts to make it almost impossible to speak up for Palestine and other people who are subject to the murderous rampage of Anglo-American imperialism. Thank you for watching this program. I hope you've enjoyed this. Be sure to subscribe to the Decline and Fall YouTube channel and our Substack as well for future interviews, specials, and more films like this. See you next time, and thank you for watching.